Welcome to Chp6T1 Services Marketing. In this video, we will discuss another P of services marketing, which is price. A good way to understand price is through the pricing tripod. By the end of the video, you will be able to list the 3 legs of the pricing tripod, explain what each leg consists of, and discuss the marketing implications of each leg of the pricing tripod. The pricing tripod consists of 3 legs. In order for the tripod to be stable, all 3 legs must be balanced. The 3 legs are cost, value, and competition. A company needs to cover their costs, so these will form the minimum price or the floor price for a service. Value is what consumers perceive the service is worth. Perceived value therefore forms the maximum or ceiling price that the firm can charge. If they charge higher than what their target customer thinks the service is worth, no one will be willing to pay for it. The final price to charge needs to be between the floor and ceiling price and also needs to take into account competitive pricing. For the rest of the video, we will be discussing each of the 3 legs. Cost-based pricing. For goods, it is common to assess fixed costs, semi-variable costs, and variable costs to arrive at the final price. Examples of fixed costs for a university, for example, would be like utilities and staff salaries. Examples for semi-variable costs would be like the fees for part-time instructors. An example for variable costs would be like the textbooks that students receive. For services with larger proportions of variable costs and or semi-variable costs, like many professional services, the traditional cost accounting approach may work. However, many services have a high ratio of fixed costs to variable costs. For example, a university has high fixed costs with expensive buildings and facilities. Or companies like SMRT have high fixed costs with equipment like trains and buses. For these companies, activity-based costing may be more accurate. Activity-based costing is more accurate to allocate indirect costs or overheads to firms with high fixed costs. It takes a look at the resources needed to perform each activity and then allocates indirect costs based on quantities and types of activities required to perform the service. It also looks at the variety and complexity of goods and services produced. Hence, for example, it is more expensive to visit a doctor for surgery compared to visit a doctor for a common cold. This is because surgery is more complex and varied and requires a lot more resources. Therefore, more indirect costs would have been allocated to surgeries compared to normal outpatient clinic services. Cost-based pricing has some challenges. It is often more difficult to trace costs, especially labor costs. For example, let's assume you are a tutor. How much do you charge? Do you charge $40 an hour? How come some tutors can charge $150 an hour and still have a long wait list? On what basis is the price so different? Costs may actually not equal value. If we charge a high price to cover our high costs and customers think that service is not worth that value, then they may not be willing to pay. Conversely, if our costs are very low and we charge a low price, then customers may think that our service is not of good quality. Hence, understanding perceived service value is important for service marketers to understand how to set price. Value. When customers compare pricing across competing services, they are in fact evaluating net value. So what is net value? Net value is the sum of all perceived benefits minus the sum of all perceived costs. Let's take a musical performance as an example. The perceived benefits, more than just the enjoyment of the performance, could be the quality time spent with a loved one or gaining knowledge, etc. The costs involved could be more than just the price of the ticket. There could also be the cost of parking the car, cost of walking to the venue, etc. With this concept of net value, we could end up having a person and situation-based price differentiation. Hence, when companies price their services, they need to take into account non-monetary costs as well. Non-monetary costs include time costs, physical costs, psychological costs, and sensory costs. Time costs relate to the time taken in purchasing the service. This could include travel time, time spent queuing, etc. Physical costs could be discomfort while waiting, or pain from receiving an injection, etc. Psychological costs could be fear or anxiety about a visit to a doctor, or sense of perceived risk if a service is high in credence attributes. Sensory costs relate to the five senses and can include being too hot or cold, or having unpleasant smells, or uncomfortable seats, or visually unappealing environments. There could also be follow-up costs. For example, after a medical appointment, there could be follow-up physiotherapy sessions if one is complaining about leg pain. Firms therefore need to take steps to minimize the non-monetary costs so that perceived value can be increased. Since perceptions of value vary widely, customers may be segmented based on factors like time savings, price sensitivity, and convenience because they all have different perceptions of value. Next, we look at competition-based pricing. In competition-based pricing, firms often look to a certain firm as the price leader, especially when consumers perceive little difference between competing offerings. Examples are like in mobile phone services or restaurants selling similar cuisine. Generally, price-based competition increases under several conditions. They are when there's an increasing number of competitors, an increasing number of substitute offers, when demand is reduced, or when there's excess capacity. These are conditions under which price competition increases. Price competition, however, can be reduced under these conditions. Non-price related costs of using competing alternatives. For example, if using the current provider for logistics services saves time and is very convenient, then companies may not necessarily want to switch to another provider just because of price. Personal relationships matter. When one has been, for example, with a trusted medical practitioner who knows one's medical history, one is unlikely to switch to another doctor just because the services are cheaper. This is also linked to switching costs. To see another doctor, the doctor will have to take time to be familiar with your medical needs, history, and requirements. The same can be said for services like hairstyling. If your hairstylist is already very familiar with your preferences and your styles, and styles your hair in the ways that you like, then you are unlikely to switch because of the personal relationship and the perceived higher switching costs. Time and location specificity. If, for example, you want to go skiing, then you definitely have to choose a country where there is snow at a certain season. Or, if you want to look at tulips in full bloom, then you are likely to choose to visit Holland. If, for example, you are taking fitness classes in town and you live near town, then you are not likely to switch to another gym offering cheaper classes operating from, say, Tampines or Jurong East. Firms that always react to competitors' price changes run the risk of engaging in a price war where the winners will never be the companies but their customers. Companies therefore need to take into account the entire cost to customers when looking at competitive offering, including non-monetary costs, switching costs, etc. In this video, we have just examined the three legs of the pricing tripod to better understand how companies should price services. In the next video, we shall examine revenue management, also related to the pricing of services.